a 100-ton airliner should drop out of the sky at roughly 103 knots. It doesn't. And what keeps it floating onto the runway isn't raw engine power. It's the shape-shifting wing transformation. Extending your flaps changes the physical geometry of your wing in real time, doubling camber and surface area so you can fly dangerously slow without stalling. Welcome back to this new episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z. Today we're discussing the letter F, and the topic we're gonna discuss, as you already might have guessed, is the flaps. Extending flap changes your wing profile in two ways. It increases surface area and deepens wing's curvature, or camber. This forces air to deflect downward faster, generating massive airlift at speeds that would otherwise cause an immediate stall. So let me prove it in the sim using the Cessna 172, in this case with the Garmin G1000, but you can try it of course also without the G1000, depending on what you prefer. So what we're gonna do is two demos. The first demo will be, we're gonna say remain with flap 0 and then pull back the power to 0 and see what happens. And likely we'll stall at, I do think, 50-60 knots, maybe earlier, maybe later. Then we're gonna do the same thing, but then with full flaps, and then you will see that you can survive a little bit longer. I'm gonna go inside the aircraft to show you how you can control the flaps for those who don't know where to find them. The flaps can be found over here in the Cessna 172. Currently they're in the up state, but if you move them down you can go to 10 degrees, 20 degrees until full. There's one thing which you need to keep in mind, that the flaps can be used, but you need to watch out, because if you say push them down too far, it can have a negative effect, which we will discuss later in this video. To showcase what happens when you drop the flaps, let me go outside the aircraft again, show you once more. So keep an eye on this part of the wing. If I press the arrow and I'll show it with the mouse again, here you can see that the part of the wing is getting extended a bit, and if I would continue doing this it would be even more extended, but I'm gonna revert it back to 0, because now we're gonna do our first demo, and that's turning down the power to 0. You can see that the speed drops pretty fast. Of course we try to say stay on that 2000 feet, because that's what we want, because else the aircraft will speed up, and that's not what we want in this case, because then the stall will take a little bit longer to happen. And here you can see 60, and here you hear the stall horn already. And you know what happens if you're flying too long with this, then well, likely you'll end up in the ocean, or in the North Sea in this case, which is below us. So increase the power again. So here we go. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna let the aircraft recover a bit, so increase the speed a bit, but also make sure that we're climbing to that 2000 feet again. And then we're gonna do the same thing, but then with flaps full. Keep in mind what I said. Setting flaps to full also could have a negative effect, but for now let's ignore it a bit, because I will discuss it later in this video. So here we go, we're at 2000 feet roughly. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop the flaps to full. So you can either do that with the mouse, or you can of course do that also with the controller which you have. You can directly see that the aircraft starts climbing. So that's the negative effect I mentioned already, which I didn't want to show you yet, but that's the negative thing. You need to keep that in mind. Also what you see is that the aircraft speed will drop massively already. Now if I power down or switch the throttle to 0, then you will see that I can hopefully survive a little bit longer as previously. You can see I can still survive, right? I can still, let's say, fly. And this is the difference between flaps 0 and flaps full. Of course there are intermediate steps like flap 10, flap 20, and here you hear it at roughly flap, say, 46. then you will hear the stall horn. And also let's recover it. And also let's make sure that we've set the flaps again to up. And this is simply the first demo I want to showcase to you. So why not dump full flaps immediately? Let's have a close look again at the demo, what happens when you're dropping flaps too fast and when you're flying too fast. So what happens if you drop the flaps too fast? Well, you already saw it a bit, so we're now, I'd say, above that white line over here. And you can see flaps are still good. So let me drop the flaps to maximum now. So what you will see is that the speed drops massively, and the aircraft also becomes a little bit, say, well, not so friendly anymore, and the aircraft is really hard to push it down, right? It's almost impossible to descend because we're going too fast. And as you can see, since this was a short final, and you can see that since this was a short approach, I will likely miss the approach because we're too high and I really can't say, well, I can of course push it really hard down, but that will have a negative effect because the speed will increase. So what's the correct approach? Well, let me show you. So we're back in the airplane again, so let me say do it correctly. And the correct way is to first make sure that you are in that white line, because that white line is kind of the safe space. Of course, you need to avoid or watch out that you're not, say, slowing it down too much. And as soon as you're in that white line, as we currently are, you can simply drop the flaps a little bit more. And you can see that since I'm doing that, I still need to correct the aircraft, but it's much easier to do that than comparing dropping the flaps when you're, let's say, a little bit or even much higher than that white line. So the tip here is make sure that you are at the white part of the speed tape, or the airspeed tape I should say, and then slowly, say, push down the flaps, say, correct everything you need, right? Correct the trim maybe, then push it down another slot, and then correct again, and do that until you're at full flaps. And that's likely mostly, say, pretty close to the runway when you arrive at the runway. Now that was how to handle the flaps and use it to slow down the aircraft. But what about takeoff? Why do we use partial flaps to get airborne but never full flaps or zero flaps? Without flaps, a heavy jet needs extreme ground speeds to generate lift, eating up massive amounts of runway. On modern jets, Fowler flaps slide backward on track first to increase total wing surface area before tilting down. Deploying partial flaps like flaps 1 plus F gives you that extra lift to rotate earlier without creating excessive drag. Now let's watch the aircraft in action. Aircraft A is the one with partial flaps, aircraft B is the one with full flaps. Pay attention to the climb speed once both aircrafts are taking off. But you will see that aircraft A will likely be able to have a much more steeper climb than aircraft B. So that's why you shouldn't, let's say, apply full flaps when you're taking off. See, I need to, let's say, do gears up, but watch at the speed. Watch at the speed. You can also see that the red dots, right, the maximum speed is also much lower for aircraft B compared to aircraft A, but hey, that makes sense, because if you're dropping flaps, you can simply, let's say, you can't fly fast, because then you would break the functionality of the flaps, which you also, of course, don't want to do. So this is a short demo on why you should not take off with full flaps and why you should consider to use flaps 1 plus F. Once you are airborne, you enter a race against your airspeed. Flaps are structural delicate. Exceed your maximum flap extended speed, VFE, and your aerodynamic pressure will tear the flap tracks. Watch the red barber pole on your speed tape and retract your flaps step by step as you accelerate into the climb. Remember the golden rules. Partial flaps gives you lift up without killing your climb. Full flaps steepen your descent for landing, and retracting on schedule keeps your wings intact. Master your flap speeds, anticipate the pitch surge, and you'll hold the pinpoint control on every approach and takeoff in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Of course, sometimes it requires some more practicing, but hey, I also started doing that and I'm still doing that, to be honest. Hopefully you liked the information shared in this video. If you liked it, then hit the like button, and hope to see you back next week for another episode of Microsoft Flight Simulator A to Z.